language in literacy and bilingualism. A major question for all multilingual countries has been, what is the role of bilingualism in literacy, and should bilingualism be actually encouraged or discouraged? Now, this is a question we will come back to in more depth later, but right now it is also important to see what is the impact of the language that is used in literacy on bilingualism, and what is the relationship between the two. So language used in literacy definitely influences language behavior. So if your child is studying in another language that is not his or her home language, there will definitely be a shift there will be some sort of language attrition, or there will be a shift in the behavior of that person or even that family. Now, when language is used in schools, remember it is used now to explain what Vygotsky says, some scientific concepts or concepts that are abstract. So you're talking about things which might not be there, were present at that time, but you're talking about them in abstraction. And for that also, you need complex language structures because you need to map language on different cognitive functions. For instance, when you're explaining mathematics, or when you are explaining a scientific problem, explaining what happens in the labs, you have to use language which is of a different type. Now, using that language of a different type definitely evolves the language forms a little. They do evolve because more and more, as the knowledge comes to you, new forms of functions, new forms of concepts are created, and to explain those types of concepts or the new abstract concepts, the language automatically evolves itself. That is why we see that in countries or in places or in communities where the literacy level is low, then the language change is also slower. So language takes a longer time to evolve. Institutions also exert their own specific in their own specific way change in language behavior. So in a research that I conducted, for instance, the family explained how they actually changed the language that they were using at home to enable a child who did not have Urdu as the first language to adjust to his school. So the whole family actually shifted from using a regional language to using a dominant language so that the child might succeed at school. So institutions exert their own influence. At times it is very direct like this, and sometimes it is subtle. When you're telling the child not to speak their first language or a certain language in school, the child is developing a certain values about what is right and what is wrong. So when he or she gets back home, he or she would still like to sort of apply the same rules and try to use the same language that has been legitimized by the institution. So values ascribed to languages in educational institutions gradually change the languages, not only change, but they can also lead to language shift. If we want something, some concrete examples, we have this use of Urdu, Sindhi, Persian. So if you go back to history, when Persian was the official language and most of the education was in Persian, you would come across people who would use Persian as, somebody as very literate. And that's how you would look upon that person. And gradually, and now that Persian does not have that kind of official status and does not have that kind of status in education, and it has been replaced by English. Now it is someone who is speaking in English that you would think of as somebody educated, somebody from a higher status, which is sort of sad. But the whole point over here is that institutions, the languages that they use in institutions, they choose as medium of instruction, they have an influence on the wider society in changing their language preferences, and they can even lead to a major language shift.